The Jaran Empire was a name carved into the stars. For more than 10,000 years, their fleets had spread across the galaxy like fire across dry grass. World after world fell before them. Some surrendered quickly. Others resisted for a time, but in the end all were broken. To the Jaran, conquest was not a challenge. It was a routine. They believed there was no force in the universe that could stand against them. Their ships were massive and elegant, powered by engines that bent space and tore open the distance between stars. Their weapons could reduce moons to dust. Their armies marched across worlds with cold precision. They had enslaved dozens of species, crushed hundreds, and absorbed thousands more into their ever-expanding empire. To them, war was not passion or courage. War was simply mathematics, ships, numbers, firepower. If the numbers favored them, they won. If the numbers did not, they brought more ships until they did. On the edge of their space, near a quiet system that held no real value, one of their patrol fleets moved silently. It was a routine assignment, boring but necessary. They had been there many times before and expected nothing unusual. The patrol commander, High Captain Varys, sat in his command throne with the calm arrogance of someone who had never known fear. But then the sensors spoke. "Unidentified vessel detected," reported one of the officers. The captain's crest twitched with mild annoyance. Unidentified vessels were common. Rebels, smugglers, or some desperate race that thought they could slip through Charon space unnoticed. None ever succeeded. "Show me," Varys commanded. On the screen appeared a ship, small, old, worn. It was nothing like the sleek silver forms of Jaran warcraft. Its hull was scarred with burn marks, patched in places where repairs had clearly been done in haste. Compared to their towering vessels, it looked fragile, weak. The bridge filled with quiet laughter. "This is hardly worth our time," one officer said. "Some primitive wanderer," another added. The captain allowed himself a small smile. The Empire had destroyed entire armadas. What could one tiny vessel possibly do? And yet duty required them to investigate. "Scan it," Varys ordered lazily. "Identify the species, crew size, and armament." The scanning beams crossed the void, invisible to the eye, but merciless in their depth. They pierced through the hull, mapping its engines, systems, and even the biology of the crew inside. For a moment, the bridge was filled with routine data streams, numbers, graphs, and readings. Then, silence. The first officer leaned forward, staring at the display. His crest flattened against his head.
His voice trembled as he spoke. "Captain."
"The ship is human." The laughter on the bridge stopped. Human. The word was almost a rumor among the Empire's soldiers. Stories carried across conquered territories spoke of them. Strange, scattered creatures from the outer arms of the galaxy. They were not a great power, not an empire, not even a true civilization compared to the Jaran. And yet whispers told of something strange in them. Something dangerous, Varys frowned. "Continue the scan." "What do we see?" The data spilled onto the screens. Engines, primitive, yes, but reliable. Hull plating, damaged but functional, repaired again and again with whatever was at hand. Life signs, 87 aboard. Their bodies carried traces of radiation scars, broken bones healed. Injuries survived that should have killed them. The crew stared at the numbers. The silence deepened. "This ship, it should not be flying," the science officer whispered. "It has been through storms, battles, radiation belts. Entire sections of the hull are rebuilt from scrap, and yet it continues." Varys felt a strange chill move through him. "And the crew?" The officer swallowed. "The crew should be dead. Their bodies show evidence of wounds, infections, trauma, yet every one of them lives." The captain's smile faded. His arrogance slipped, just slightly. The humans inside that fragile vessel were not like other species. They were not supposed to endure so much, and yet they had. He leaned back in his throne, eyes narrowing. For the first time in many years, he felt something he could not name. Not fear, no, not yet, but unease. "Continue monitoring," he ordered softly. The officers obeyed, but their expressions betrayed their confusion. The Empire had faced enemies with greater numbers, superior weapons, strange abilities. None had lasted. None had caused hesitation, but this single ship, battered and scarred, already felt different. And in the quiet hum of the command deck, as the alien fleet surrounded the fragile vessel, something unspoken passed among them. The thought that perhaps for the first time in 10,000 years, The Empire had not found prey. Perhaps it had found something else, something dangerous. The Charon fleet hovered silently around the tiny human ship, their massive forms casting shadows across the void. To any other species, the sight alone would have been terrifying. 1,000 warships, engines glowing, weapons ready, surrounding a single fragile vessel. But the humans did not show fear. They moved steadily through the emptiness of space, adjusting their course with precise but unremarkable motions. High Captain Varys stared at the data feeds, unable to look away. The initial scans had barely scratched the surface. Every system of the human ship was a study in improvisation. Broken power conduits were rerouted. Hull breaches patched with raw materials scavenged from the depths of space. Life support systems that should have failed were kept alive by ingenuity that no algorithm could predict. "Captain, this is unusual," murmured the science officer, his voice tight. "They should have collapsed long ago. Hull integrity is failing in multiple sections. Engines are below standard thresholds. Yet the ship keeps moving." Varys leaned closer, tension creeping into his bones. "Show me the crew." The scan shifted. Inside the ship, 87 humans moved through narrow corridors, attending to repairs, monitoring systems, and tending to the injured. The Charon sensors revealed scars, burns, and broken bones that had healed under primitive conditions. Some bore missing fingers, others limped, yet none slowed. Each carried a determination that was almost tangible, and their eyes, though human, shone with a strange, unyielding light. The science officer's crested head tilted. "Their bodies. They have endured more than any species we have catalogued. Radiation exposure, extreme temperatures, physical trauma. It should have killed them. And yet—" He stopped as if words could not describe it. "Yet they live," Varys finished for him, his voice quieter than usual. "Not only that," the officer continued, "their mental resilience is extraordinary. Stress responses, sleep deprivation, extreme fear. They've survived months under conditions that would break any other species psychologically. Their minds. They are wired to endure everything the universe can throw at them." The captain frowned, feeling an unfamiliar weight in his chest. The Empire had faced formidable enemies, some with natural abilities, others with weapons that could erase planets in a heartbeat. But the humans, they seemed to thrive under adversity. Every wound, every hardship, every failure only made them stronger. "What are they thinking?" Varys asked, almost to himself. The officer hesitated. "Hope, Captain. It is remarkable. Even in the face of extreme danger, they carry hope. It is unlike anything I have measured. It sustains them. It guides them. It drives them forward, even when survival seems impossible." Varys felt his crested head ache. He had commanded fleets in wars that lasted decades, fought enemies who were countless times larger than any human population. And yet, looking at this single ship, he understood something terrifying. Hope. Hope could be a weapon more powerful than any laser, faster than any warship. "Continue scanning. Every system, every crew member. Everything," he said finally, his voice steady but sharp. "I need to understand them fully." As the scans continued, more anomalies appeared. The humans were not just enduring. They were learning. Every damage, every failure had a response. Patterns emerged in repairs, tactics, even in their movement through space. They adapted instantly to threats, improvised solutions with resources that should have been useless, and in every decision there was purpose. "They think ahead," the science officer whispered. "They are not just surviving. They are evolving in real time. They anticipate failure and adjust before it happens. Captain, they are extraordinary." Varys's grip tightened on his command throne. He had read reports of brave species, cunning species, even species who could endure more than normal, but nothing prepared him for this. He understood with a sinking certainty that this was not a species to underestimate, not by numbers, not by firepower, not by the Empire's centuries of dominance. The humans in their fragile little ship had shown something the Charon had never seen in their long history, an unbreakable will. One ship, 87 souls, and yet more dangerous than 1,000 fleets. The captain felt a whisper of fear creep into his thoughts. He had always believed the universe belonged to those with strength, technology, and numbers. Yet here was a force that defied all logic, all expectation. One ship, a handful of humans, had shown resilience that could not be calculated. "Prepare a report for the High Council," Varys ordered. But be careful. Do not exaggerate. Simply record what is. The officer's eyes were wide. Captain, you cannot warn them enough. The humans, Varys cut him off. I understand. But the council will not take this seriously. They never do. He leaned back, staring at the human vessel as it drifted steadily, purposefully toward the outer edge of the system. It moved as though it belonged to the stars themselves, unafraid, unbroken. And in that moment, Varys knew something he could not fully comprehend. The humans were not like any other species. They were not predictable. They were not controllable. And their resilience? It was a storm waiting to sweep across the galaxy. The fleet remained around them, silent, waiting, yet every officer aboard felt it. The creeping realization that something had changed. Not in the humans, but in themselves. Fear, respect, unease. And for the first time in thousands of years, the Jaren Empire faced a truth it could not ignore. A single human ship had already begun to rewrite the rules of the galaxy. The Jaren High Command had never felt uncertainty. For 10,000 years their fleets had moved across the galaxy like unstoppable shadows. Worlds fell, species broke, and resistance vanished before their might. But now, something new had entered their calculations. The lone human ship lingered at the edge of Sharon-controlled space, moving slowly but deliberately. High Captain Varys watched the screens, unable to look away. Every time he tried to dismiss it, the data forced him to confront a truth he did not want to admit. One ship, 87 humans, and yet every measure of their endurance defied expectation. The science officer's voice was low, tense. Captain, I have cross-referenced their damage reports with their journey logs. They have survived conditions that would annihilate an entire Jaren fleet. Varys felt a chill creep across his crest. Explain, he said, though he already sensed the answer. Radiation storms, asteroid collisions, atmospheric burns, weapon strikes. Every system in this vessel has failed and been rebuilt, often under extreme conditions. Yet the ship continues. The crew continues. Their numbers, almost 80, should be weak. Yet there is no evidence of surrender, no sign of psychological collapse. Captain, they are relentless. Varys closed his eyes. He had studied humans before, of course. Everyone in the Empire had. They were a primitive species from the edge of known space. Small in number, technologically inferior. They should be weak. They should be easy prey. But the reports didn't lie. These humans were not weak. Not even close. Have we seen this before? He asked. The officer shook his head, his crest twitching nervously. Nothing like this. Some species can survive disasters. Some adapt slowly. But humans, they endure beyond reason. Every loss they suffer strengthens them. Every danger they face is used to learn, to improve, to fight better next time. It is frightening. Varys's claws tightened around the arms of his command throne. Frightening. That word echoed in his mind. Strange and alien. He had led hundreds of campaigns. He had crushed armies 10 times the size of his own. He had never felt fear. But now, staring at the fragile ship drifting through the void, he felt the seed of it grow. They think they can survive anything, he muttered, almost to himself. And they might be right. The officer hesitated, then spoke carefully. Captain, we should warn the High Council. They need to understand what we are facing. Humans are not predictable. They are not controllable. If one ship can endure this much, an entire fleet, an entire species, could change everything. Varys shook his crest slowly. He knew the Council would not listen. They never did. The Empire had faced strange species before and dismissed every warning. They will call it exaggeration, he said. They will say we overanalyzed a single weak vessel. Perhaps, the officer replied, but one weak vessel has already survived everything we have thrown at it. That is not weakness, that is terror. Varys looked back at the human ship. Its hull was scarred, engines flickering in places, but it moved with steady confidence. There was no panic, no hesitation. Just a quiet determination that radiated from every reading. The humans were not afraid, and that lack of fear, against a fleet that had crushed entire civilizations, was more dangerous than any weapon the Sharon possessed. "What are they thinking?" he whispered. "Hope." The officer's words came back to him. Hope. The humans carried it even in the cold void of space, even when every advantage was against them. It was not naive hope. It was survival born of struggle, endurance forged in fire, a belief that they could outlast anything. Varys's stomach twisted. The Jaren had always relied on fear, on the inevitability of their dominance. But these humans, they did not fear. They could not be measured. They could not be predicted. And if the High Council continued as before, underestimating them, it would be the Empire's doom. The captain leaned back in his throne. The quiet of the fleet seemed heavier now. The other officers exchanged glances, tension visible in every movement. This was the first time in recorded history that the Jaren fleet had felt uneasy, not uncertainty, unease, a creeping, deep awareness that something fundamental had changed. "This is not just a ship," Varys said, his voice low. "It is a warning. One human vessel is enough to remind us that we are not invincible, that our power, our empire, is not eternal." The science officer nodded. "Captain, they will not stop. Not here, not anywhere. They will endure. They will adapt. And when the time comes, they will return, not just to survive, but to conquer." Varys's eyes narrowed. The humans had already begun to rewrite the rules. The rules the Jaren had known for 10,000 years. One fragile ship, one stubborn crew, and yet in that tiny vessel, the seeds of a storm were already growing. And for the first time in millennia, the Jaren realized something they had never known. They might not win the next war. They might not survive the next encounter, and this single human ship had shown them the truth. The Empire was not yet dead, but perhaps it was already doomed. The Jaren High Command had sent countless fleets across countless systems. They had faced enemies with strange powers, massive numbers, and cunning strategies. They had crushed civilizations that thought themselves undefeatable. And yet for the first time they faced a species that made them question everything they had ever believed. The lone human ship floated like a speck against the infinite black of space. Fragile, worn, patched countless times, it should have been nothing more than debris. And yet it moved steadily, purposefully, as if the universe itself had chosen to protect it. High Captain Varys watched in silence. The scans had gone deeper now, revealing not just the hull and engines but the human crew in excruciating detail. The Jaren could read their physiology, their neural patterns, even the psychological responses under extreme stress, and what they found shook them to their cores. "Captain," whispered the science officer, his crest lowered. "These humans, they are extraordinary." Varys did not respond. He already knew. Every indicator, every anomaly, every impossible survival told the same story. Humans were not just surviving, they were thriving in ways that defied logic. The scan showed wounds that should have been fatal, burns that should have cauterized arteries, broken bones that should have left the body useless, radiation that should have left their DNA corrupted beyond repair, and yet the humans healed. Slowly perhaps, but completely. They adapted. They rebuilt. And they carried on. "They turned failure into strength," the officer continued, voice trembling. "Every scar, every injury, every challenge. They learn from it. They improve. They adapt. They evolve. And their minds." Varys leaned forward, his claws tapping on the armrest. "Their minds? They are remarkable. Even when exhausted, even when surrounded by death, their hope persists. They believe in tomorrow. They believe they can survive. And that belief, Captain, that belief drives everything they do. It sustains them through conditions that would break any other species." Varys's chest tightened. The Jaren had faced courage, but courage was temporary. Fear could break courage. Death could break courage. But hope? Hope was untouchable. Hope was a weapon no laser, no missile, no fleet could destroy. They think beyond survival, the officer added. They strategize even when their lives are at risk. They repair while under fire. They protect their wounded while under attack. They refuse to accept defeat in any form. Varys felt a chill run through him. One ship, 87 humans, yet the data suggested they could endure far more than any fleet the Jaren had ever known. This was not just a species with stubborn survival instinct. This was something else, something dangerous. They are not afraid, Varys whispered. They do not fear us. They do not fear death, and they carry hope in their hearts, the officer nodded. Captain, we have faced numbers, weapons, technology. We have faced species designed for war. Nothing has ever endured like this. Nothing has ever learned so fast, adapted so thoroughly. One human ship shows us that the rules we follow, rules that have never failed, may no longer apply. Varys leaned back, closing his eyes. The vastness of space outside the fleet was silent, yet heavy with the weight of possibility. One human ship. A fragile vessel that should have been destroyed. And yet it moved forward, carrying a crew that refused to surrender, refused to die, refused to obey the limitations of biology, physics, or probability. The captain felt a new emotion, strange and unwelcome. It was not fear exactly, it was deeper. Respect, yes, but mixed with dread. The humans were not just clever or lucky. They were relentless. They were adaptable. And they had hope. A force the Jaren had never encountered in their perfect logical empire. Varys spoke softly, almost to himself. We have underestimated them for too long. We have treated them as primitive, as insignificant, and one ship has already shown us our mistake. If they can survive this, what happens when they strike back? The officer's crested head lowered. They will strike back, Captain. And when they do, they will not merely fight. They will endure. They will rebuild. They will advance. And they will come for everything we hold. The captain opened his eyes, staring at the screens. The tiny human ship moved steadily, silently, as if daring the Empire to try and stop it. Every patch on its hull, every flicker in its engines, every mark of repair told a story of survival. A story of stubbornness, courage, and hope. And for the first time in 10,000 years, High Captain Varys understood something terrifying. The humans were not just another species. They were a force of nature. One that could not be measured, predicted, or destroyed. One that would endure no matter the cost. The Jaren fleet continued to orbit the ship in silence, but inside the command decks, every officer knew the truth. The Empire had faced countless enemies, but none like this. None that refused to die. None that could turn weakness into strength, despair into hope, and survival into a weapon. Varys leaned back, voice barely a whisper. We are witnessing the beginning of something we cannot control. And for the first time, the Empire feels small. The humans sailed on, unaware of the fear they had already sown. One fragile ship against a galaxy-spanning empire, and yet, already, they had begun to rewrite the fate of the stars. High Captain Varys sat alone in the dim command chamber of his flagship. Around him, the hum of engines and the subtle glow of the control panels were the only sounds. But his mind was not calm. It was full of images, numbers, and patterns that refused to make sense in the way the Jaren had always understood the universe. The humans. That tiny battered ship. One vessel. 87 humans, and yet it had already defied everything the Empire knew about survival, strategy, and resilience. Varys had seen their hull, their scars, their injuries. He had seen their minds under stress, their resolve tested, and he knew now with an unshakable certainty that the High Council must be warned. He had spent hours preparing his report, cross-checking every scan, every reading. He knew the Council would dismiss him, as they had dismissed warnings about other species before, but he could not remain silent. This is not a threat to dismiss, he muttered to himself. One ship has already survived everything we threw at it, and yet it moves forward. The science officer approached, crested head bowed. Captain, are you sure about sending this? The High Council. They do not listen to caution. Varys's claws tightened around the armrests. I am certain. They must understand what we are facing. This is no longer about numbers, technology, or fleets. One human ship has shown the truth. They are not bound by the limitations we take for granted. They endure, they adapt, and they survive against impossibility. The officer hesitated, then nodded slowly. Very well, Captain, but how do you explain it? How do you convey the scale of this? How do you make them understand that we are witnessing something unprecedented? Varys took a deep breath. I will show them everything. Every scar, every injury, every repair, every log of survival. They must see it. And they must understand that underestimating humans will be the greatest mistake the Jaren Empire has ever made. Transmission protocols were initiated. Every detail of the human ship, the engines, the hull, the crew, their resilience, and their adaptation, was sent to the Council. The data was raw, unfiltered, undeniable. It told a story that no words could fully capture. But it was enough to seed doubt. Hours later, the High Council convened. The chamber was vast, filled with leaders of thousands of fleets. They were accustomed to decisions of war, conquest, and extermination. And yet Varys's report hung over them like a shadow. The humans are extraordinary, he said, voice firm. One vessel, 87 humans, has survived conditions that would destroy entire fleets. Their bodies, their minds, their will to survive. Nothing we have encountered compares. They adapt. They endure. And they carry hope. A force that no weapon, no strategy, no empire can suppress. The counselors murmured. Some laughed. Some dismissed it with a wave of a clawed hand. One even scoffed. It is a single primitive species. A weak ship cannot challenge our empire. We have faced far greater threats. Varys' claws tightened. Do not misunderstand me. I am not warning you of power measured in firepower alone. I am warning you of persistence, of adaptability, of a species that will not surrender, will not fear, and will not die. If we continue to dismiss them, they will grow, and in time they will challenge everything we hold. A silence fell over the chamber. Some counselors shifted uneasily. Others sneered, but the doubt had taken root. The idea that the humans were more than insignificant prey was spreading. It was dangerous, uncomfortably new. The humans are predators in a form we have never understood. Varys continued. They may appear weak, but every hardship they survive only strengthens them. They learn. They adapt. They endure. And one day, if we do not act with wisdom, they will return not as prey but as conquerors. The chamber erupted into debate. Some called for immediate strikes to eliminate the human vessel. Others argued that it was unnecessary. After all, it was only one ship. But even in the loudest voices of dismissal, the seed of fear had taken hold. Every Jaren officer who had seen the scans knew that the humans were something no plan could fully contain. Varys remained silent as the council bickered. He knew they would eventually send fleets, they would attempt strategies, and they would calculate numbers. But deep in his heart, he understood that the humans had already begun something the Jaren could not stop. One ship had shown them that their empire, vast and unchallenged for millennia, might not last another century. When the council finally adjourned, Varys returned to his observation deck. The human ship floated on the edge of Sharan space, scarred, battered, and yet unbroken. Its tiny lights blinked like a heartbeat against the infinite darkness. The captain whispered almost to himself. We should have destroyed them when they were small. When they were weak. Now it is too late. They are coming. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly. The humans sailed among them, unaware of the dread they had already sown. And in that silent void, the first true doubt about the Empire's future had been planted. For the Jaren, the warning was clear. One ship had revealed the terrifying truth. Humanity was not a species to be conquered. Humanity was a storm, and the Empire would feel the first winds of it soon enough. The Jaren fleets had moved quickly after the High Council debate, spreading across the system like a net closing in. Orders had been given. The human ship must be destroyed. The counselors were certain this would be a routine engagement. After all, one small vessel could not withstand the combined might of the Jaren. High Captain Varys, however, felt a deep unease. The humans were not ordinary. The scans, the data, the crew's resilience, they had all whispered a warning he could not ignore. And yet he followed orders. Fleet formation, attack vectors, and weapons ready. Everything proceeded with precision. The human ship was detected on the sensors, its battered hull illuminated against the void like a candle in a hurricane. The Jaren officers grinned at what they assumed would be a simple victory. A single vessel against thousands of warships. How could it possibly survive? Then the humans responded. The transmission was brief, clear, and utterly unexpected. "We see you." A murmur ran through the Jaren command deck. One officer laughed nervously. Another asked if it was a threat. But the humans said nothing else. They did not plead. They did not negotiate. They simply declared awareness, and in that moment it was clear they were not afraid. Varys's claws tightened around his armrests. His chest felt heavy. He had commanded fleets for decades, faced enemies who would have terrified lesser officers. Yet the calm in those human words struck him more than any laser blast could have. "Open fire," the Council's command had said, and so the Jaren ships unleashed their might. Beams of concentrated energy streaked across the void, a deadly lattice of fire and precision aimed at the fragile human vessel. But the humans did not die. The small ship twisted, maneuvered, and danced through the barrage with impossible grace. Every strike that should have obliterated it was dodged, absorbed, or deflected. The hull, scarred and battered, held firm in ways the Jaren had never seen. "Impossible," one officer whispered. "How can it survive this?" The humans returned fire, but it was not overwhelming. It was precise, surgical. They targeted weak points in the attacking ships, forcing the Jaren to adjust, to react, to hesitate. One by one, small errors began to appear in the fleet's calculations. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to endure. And that endurance was far more dangerous than victory. Varys watched, a cold dread settling into his chest. Every maneuver, every adaptation, every calculated risk the humans took revealed something terrifying. They learned. Every failed strike by the Jaren was analyzed. Every exposure to damage was noted, and every response was improved. They were evolving in real time. They are learning faster than we can adjust, the science officer said, voice barely audible. "Captain, they are extraordinary." The captain swallowed hard. Extraordinary did not begin to describe it. The humans were not just surviving. They were teaching the fleet how to fail only to survive stronger. And with every passing moment, the Jaren began to realize that this was not a species to underestimate. Another officer shouted orders to concentrate fire, but even as beams streaked toward the human vessel, Varys could see the pattern forming. Every attack was countered, avoided, or turned into an advantage. The humans were stubborn, relentless, unbroken, and above all, they had hope. Varys's chest tightened again. Hope. That simple human emotion, something the Jaren had always considered weak, meaningless, was their greatest weapon. It guided them, sustained them, and made them untouchable. A ship that should have been dust still sailed through space, carrying the lives of 87 humans who refused to surrender. For the first time, Varys realized that no amount of firepower, no number of fleets, could guarantee victory against beings who refused to be broken. One ship had already shown the Jaren that they had underestimated the humans, and every moment in this battle only proved it further. The fleet began to falter, not from defeat, but from hesitation. Even the most seasoned officers felt the unease spreading, a creeping acknowledgement that this fight was not going to end easily. The humans did not fear death. They did not plead for mercy. They endured, adapted, and survived. And as the Jaren ships adjusted, recalculated, and fired again, the captain whispered to himself, voice low and trembling with a mixture of awe and fear, "They are not prey. They are predators we cannot measure, and when they return, they will come for everything we hold. Outside the command decks in the cold, silent void, the small human ship continued to move, scarred, battered, almost broken, yet utterly alive. Its tiny engines left a faint trail in the darkness, a mark that it had survived impossible odds and would continue to survive. And in that survival, the Jaren fleet felt the first true taste of fear. Because survival was only the beginning. The void was silent, save for the hum of the Jaren fleet and the faint pulse of the lone human ship drifting ahead. Every beam of energy, every tactical maneuver, every fleet formation had failed to destroy it. And yet the humans did not celebrate victory. They did not boast. They simply moved forward, scarred, battered, and unbroken. High Captain Varys sat in the observation deck of his flagship, staring at the tiny vessel. His claws rested heavily on the armrests, but it was not exhaustion that weighed on him. It was realization. For the first time in his life, he understood something he had never believed possible. The Jaren Empire, mighty and unchallenged for 10,000 years, was not invincible. The High Council had convened again, summoned by Varys's urgent transmissions. They had argued, debated, dismissed warnings, and finally commanded a direct strike. Yet one human ship had survived them all. And it had survived not by firepower nor by technology, nor by overwhelming numbers. It had survived through something the Empire had never reckoned with. Indomitable will, relentless adaptation, and hope that refused to die. The council chambers were tense. Many leaders refused to admit it, but doubt had taken root. Some whispered that perhaps the humans were more than primitive prey. Some argued that an entire species with this kind of resilience could be unstoppable. The word doom floated unspoken in the minds of many, though none dared say it aloud. Varys's voice cut through the silence. The humans are coming. Not as one ship, not as one fleet, but as a species that will endure everything we throw at them. They will adapt. They will survive. They will return stronger than before, and when they do, the Empire will not be ready. Some counselors protested, arguing logic, numbers, probability, but Varys shook his head. Logic could not measure hope. Numbers could not predict stubborn survival. Probabilities were meaningless against a species that refused to surrender to the impossible. Outside the fleet, the small human ship continued its journey. Each scar on its hull, every flicker of its failing engines, every repaired panel told a story of perseverance. Every human aboard had been tested, and every human had survived. They carried the weight of impossible odds and the lessons of countless near deaths. Yet their eyes, visible in the data feeds, were alive with determination. "They are teaching us," whispered one officer, voice trembling. "Every strike we made, every maneuver we executed, they are learning from it. Every mistake we committed only makes them stronger." Varys's jaw tightened. "They are not our enemy yet," he said softly. "But they will be, and when they are, no fleet, no weapon, no strategy will be enough to stop them." The humans had survived the impossible, and that survival was a message far greater than any weapon could deliver. It was a declaration: we endure, we adapt, we rise, and the empire that underestimated us will fall. One officer dared to ask, "Captain, what do we do now?" Varys looked at the human vessel, a tiny flicker against the black infinity, and his voice was cold and certain. "We prepare, we wait, but deep down, we know the truth. The humans are not prey. They are a storm that cannot be stopped. And one day they will return. One day they will show the universe that survival itself is the ultimate power." The Jaren fleets regrouped, their engines humming, their weapons ready, but their confidence was shattered. No command, no calculation, no doctrine could erase the lesson they had learned. One human ship had rewritten the rules of the galaxy. One human ship had shown that even the mightiest empire could not predict, control, or conquer the human spirit. And in that realization, Varys understood the fate of his people. The empire would not fall today, perhaps not tomorrow. But the seed of humanity's endurance had been sown, and the universe would remember it. The tiny human ship moved steadily onward, leaving the Jaren fleet behind. Its engines flickered, its hull was scarred, its crew was weary but not defeated. They had survived. They had endured. They had proven what the Jaren could not yet fully grasp. That hope, resilience, and the will to continue were powers greater than any fleet, stronger than any weapon, and more lasting than any empire. And so, in the quiet darkness of space, one battered human ship carried on, unaware of the dread it had sown, unaware of the lesson it had taught. The empire was still vast, but the truth was clear. The humans were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same again. High Captain Varys stared at the stars, voice low and almost a whisper. The humans endure. They adapt, and we are doomed. The void stretched endlessly, and the tiny human vessel sailed on, scarred, stubborn, unbroken, and unstoppable. Humanity was not just alive. Humanity was eternal.